Hello everyone, this is a brief presentation on Evans and Reid's text, Dangerously Exposed: The Life and Death of the Resilient Subject. I'll just be reading out from a brief write-up in which I've tried to collect the points which I've gleaned from the text. Evans and Reid's article, Dangerously Exposed: The Life and Death of the Resilient Subject, explores the political implications of accepting danger as a precondition of life, where the subject is expected to develop the quality of resilience as an appropriate response to danger. The resilient subject begins from the hypothesis that dangers which threaten us in the present milieu are beyond all anthropomorphic control. These dangers have to be confronted through evolving a mechanism of psychic and corporeal resilience, which help us to adapt better to adverse or unpleasant conditions. We are expected to develop a mechanism of continual adaptation where we have to abandon any hope of constructive intervention that questions the premises of the neoliberal polity. This shuts down or forecloses all channels of resistance from a sentient, rising out of a sentient public sphere, resulting in a neutralization of political agency. What we have in the form of policy reforms is a sustained exposure to danger, which becomes part of a learning curve as we learn to adapt to tumultuous changes we are witnessing in the age of the Anthropocene. In short, we are looking at danger as an endemic state of affairs where we have to continually adapt ourselves to a fast mutating biosphere, economic turbulence, and rapid recontourings of the geopolitical landscape happening on a planetary scale. The discourse of resilience has been borrowed from ecology, where it concerns the properties of non-living systems that enable such systems to adapt to catastrophic changes. Analyzed from a positive standpoint, sustained exposure to danger trains us to evolve mechanisms of coping with catastrophes looming in the near future, thus grooming us to evolve certain life skills. This attitude towards danger is shaped by multiple discursive spaces, neoliberalism being one where exposure to risks becomes a precondition of economic growth. Ecology, as discussed earlier, and the emerging field of disaster studies, which concerns catastrophic processes such as climate change, whose effects cannot be reversed due to the scale and intensity of these events. Under the circumstances, we can only hope to mitigate the effects of these macro shifts impacting the status of the planet, giving rise to extreme and challenging conditions that test our resilience. The theorization of the discursive parameters of resilience takes into account a strong element of unpredictability in terms of catastrophic unraveling of events, while at the same time articulating the need to evolve the quality of resilience as part of a behavioral strategy to withstand these sweeping and far-reaching changes, all of which fall within the empirical framework of disaster management. Resilience basically optimizes and streamlines our response to hazardous events in order to formulate the best possible strategy that would enable us to anticipate such events, absorb the impact, accommodate and recover within the shortest possible time span. What we are witnessing in the present milieu of the Anthropocene is a paradigm shift from resistance towards resilience, where the subject is gradually divested of its political agency and made to comply with neoliberal patterns of governance and policy changes, which often involve drastic socio-political economic reforms. There is thus no room in neoliberalism for the politically empowered or vocal subject, as resilience takes as its premise an absolute loss of control over catastrophic events. This is suggestive of a reactionary turn in events where the subject is incapacitated by the multiscalar events operating at the societal, ecological, economic, and political levels. This in turn contributes to an ontology of nihilism, or a will to nothingness. What does liberalism as a mode of governance prioritize? It is solely concerned with securing its systemic goals and safeguarding its regime of governance largely through management strategies. In other words, as a system of governance, it is conservative in orientation and practices biopolitical management to ward off threats. It is a dysfunctional regime which harbors multiple contradictions and antagonisms and subscribes to a lopsided scheme of development. As an exclusive frame of governance catering to the interests of the market, it is a project which is steeped in controversies. Neoliberalism believes in excising all that falls outside its territorial purview and practices systemic precaritization of certain forms of life, treating certain sections of the population as disposable or expendable in order to secure the interests of a coterie of individuals, capitalists, and bureaucrats who drive the system. In neoliberalism, as modular individuals, we are expected to groom ourselves so that we can fall in line with neoliberal policy changes, which divest life of any larger purpose, reducing it to the banal task of self-perpetuation. It prioritizes biological longevity over vitality of psychic life and exercise of the imagination, thus reducing life to a vegetal state, lacking in purposive or meaningful action. This leaves us with a world depopulated of properly human subjects. Danger becomes the driving force that propels a resilient subject through a socio-political economic plane of operation that is complex, unpredictable, and unstable, challenging our survival skills. Resilience is thus largely concerned with effectuating a behavioral response and reifying certain behavioral patterns or modifications, which in their myopic focus on short-term policies to combat an immediate threat occludes a broader panoramic historical view that underpins these changes, resulting in a condition of collective amnesia within quotes. There is a normativization of danger as it is weaved into the fabric of the everyday. The discourse of resilience is also further cemented through media aestheticization, concerned with manufacturing a cosmetic response through promotional campaigns, where public response to a catastrophe is manipulated through photographic frames relayed across social media platforms, public broadcast systems, and news media, emphasizing the need to tide over a crisis and carry on. As this quote from the New York Times illustrates, which says, reflect, remember, carry on. Using the media or art as a launchpad that reiterates the toxic positivity of neoliberal expansionism in the face of loss. In the present regime, truth cannot be defined in terms of fixed senses, but is produced by a shifting terrain dependent on the contingency of circumstances. The only constant locus of existence in the present regime is an allegiance to the truth of power, which should be like might is right. Reid and Evans draw attention to the parallels between ecological and economic models of thinking. Strategies of resilience are transposed from an ecological plane of operation to an economic one concerned with financial crisis management, economic deregulation, neoliberal austerity measures, and cutting down costs on the public sector. The Austrian economic theorist Friedrich von Hayek projects financial or economic turbulence as something beyond our control, acknowledging that the present regime of capital expansion is built on insecure foundations, requiring constant improvisation, while the discourse of resilience is justified in terms of political and economic rationalities, informing a neoliberal episteme of risk management. The market is projected as a potent political force, leading us towards emancipation and freedom. The delivery of social services through public sector enterprises has been severely compromised under the circumstances and replaced by sporadic welfare provisions, sponsored by non-governmental agencies, which has again opened up possibility of novel collaborations between the public and the private sector, working towards a marketized administration of social care and delivery of aid in times of crisis. Zygmunt Bauman calls the state a liquid world where established knowledge inspire quote-unquote annoying suspicion as we participate in quote-unquote an uncertain game ruled by chaos rather than order. Henry Giroux refers to this condition as the twilight of the social, where there is a shift from utopianism to embrace the catastrophic. Social responsibility is replaced by a neoliberalized care for the self. Neoliberalism is not just a free play of market forces, but as a regime is deeply invested and concerned with the desiring subject, who's gradually indoctrinated into a cult of resilience, reformulated as quote unquote a personal attribute in which citizen subjects are trained to imbibe the qualities of balance, confidence, and personal strength in order to ensure a speedy recovery from all kinds of setbacks. The subject's ontological and epistemological status is subject to continual manipulation within a again, this is a quote from Reeds and Evans, within a politically allegiant framework, as they refer to it, profoundly altering the nature of the subject who finds himself or herself within a network of technical accords and natural frames of reference situated within the epistemological constraints of neoliberalism. The individual is, what is foregrounded is individual responsibility and action based on rational choices, carefully weighing the pros and cons. Promotion of a commonsensical approach through a cult of self-help manuals. Such a pragmatic know-how approach, however, conceals a sinister political agenda, affecting our fundamental capacity to resist inhuman conditions of living and strive for a better quality of life through securing fundamental services such as education and healthcare. Adaptability in the face of life-changing catastrophes also disarms us politically, sabotaging any political vision of the world which might enable us to live better and more secure lives. All of this ties in with the neoliberal manual for survival, with its promotion of risks as an endemic condition and emphasis on self-care and individual resilience. Such a homogeneous narrative of resilience, however, conceals the biopolitical divide between those who have the resources to secure themselves and those who lack access to basic resources. Frederick Jameson talks about waning of the utopian ideal as a reflection of the historical and political times that merits attention as a symptom of an underlying problem, an ailing symptom. With the loss of political vision and drying up of the political imaginary, there has been a simultaneous depletion of history into fragmented episodes that define the present state of political chaos, lacking a sense of direction or purpose. Under the circumstances, the very notion of utopia in its suggestion of an altered paradigm of existence carries revolutionary currency. In this post-utopian world, the only way we can avoid a dystopic collapse is by insulating ourselves from the damages of a fast mutating social landscape in the gated security of elite communities. Barbed fences, physical walls, surveillance technologies, catastrophe-proof architectures, insurance premiums, to armed guards patrolling the parameters speak of the exclusive nature of such a utopia. Resilience as a way of life does not take into account quote-unquote racial, cultural, and gender discriminations, which act as hurdles, further jeopardizing the lives of at-risk populations, which, having failed to live up to resilience against systemic barbarism, are conveniently expunged or contained. How can we grapple with death in life situation where we merely exist as cogs in the system with no avenues of self-improvement or self-empowerment? How do we make ourselves into sentient humans who are critically invested in the problems that define the present moment, not as an isolated event, but something which is accretive and involves transversal mapping of catastrophes? We need to let go of our old selves. We need to suffer a metaphorical death and reaffirm our political and imaginative vitality in order to deal with the death in life scenario. So, thank you.